Snow fell that day like a slow confession, drifting down in pale veils that softened the edges of the world. It clung to the shoulders of strangers and muffled the hollow slap of boots on frozen mud. The auction yard stood in the heart of town like a gallows square, the wooden stage slick with ice. The crowd huddled close as if their breath alone might keep the blood in their bodies warm. But the cold was not what made the air so sharp. It was the watching, the measuring, the silent trade of human dignity for coin. She was there when I came around the corner, bound at the wrists, her chin high though her back bore the red welts of a fresh lashing. Her name, I would later learn, was Sahel. She wore no coat, only a faded calico dress torn at the hem, her bare ankles vanishing into thin moccasins. Her skin was the color of cedar bark warmed by sun, but today it was pale under the sting of winter. Black hair spilled down her back like the night that hadn't ended. And though snow kissed her lashes, she did not blink. The auctioneer's voice carried like a whip crack, oily, coaxing, each word meant to strip her of what little she still owned. A strong back, a steady hand. Knows her way round a ranch. Open the bidding at. His tone wavered when she met his eyes, not in defiance, but in some quiet refusal to be made small. I saw one man spit into the snow, another chuckle as if he were buying a fine horse. The whip still hung in the hand of the man who'd brought her here, its leather tip dark with melted frost. A gust swept through, scattering snow into the crowd's faces. I don't recall deciding to step forward, only the feel of my boots hitting the wood. 200, I said. The crowd shifted. The auctioneer blinked, then stammered out for higher offers. None came. My voice had been enough. With a glance sharp as a hatchet, I counted out the bills, feeling the weight of eyes on my back like stones. When the rope was cut from her wrist, she didn't thank me. She didn't even look at me. She only rubbed her skin once, then let her arms fall to her sides. Her lashes lifted finally and her gaze flicked to mine, not soft, not grateful, but searching. Perhaps for the catch in the deal. Perhaps to see if I was just another kind of chain. I led her to my horse without words. She walked without stumbling, though her shoes were soaked through before we'd even left the yard. Snow whispered down in the narrow lanes, the sound swallowed by the emptiness between buildings. The world had gone still except for the muffled rhythm of hooves. The ride home stretched like a road between two winters. The air tasted of iron, the kind that comes from blood and cold. I kept my coat buttoned against the wind until I saw her shoulders shaking. Without speaking, I slid it off and held it toward her. She didn't take it. I draped it over the saddle horn instead. Miles later, when I glanced over, it was wrapped around her tightly, the collar pulled to her chin. My ranch lay crouched in the lee of the hills, its fence lines lost under drifts, its roofs carrying the weight of storms past. The corral posts stood black against the snow, each one etched with wind. I took her inside through the mudroom, the warmth of the hearth pressing close. The smell of pine pitch and old leather filled the space. I pointed her toward the small room off the kitchen. Bed, quilt, basin. You can stay there, I said, and she stepped inside without a word. In the morning she was gone from the room. I found her outside, sleeves rolled, mending the corral fence with hands already raw from cold. The sky was a dull silver above her, snow gathered in the folds of her skirt. She worked as though she had always belonged there, her hair lifting in the wind, her movements precise and sure. I didn't interrupt. Days found their rhythm. She rose before the sun, fed the livestock, hauled water from the pump without waiting to be told. She never asked for help, and I didn't hover, though I noticed the skin on her hands splitting from the cold. One evening, I left a pair of wool gloves on the table. She passed them twice without touching them, but the next morning they were gone, and she wore them without comment. It wasn't long before the weight of other people's eyes followed us home. Clara Hensley came by with a loaf of bread she said was too much for her alone. She stood in the doorway, squinting past me at Sahel sweeping the porch. You keep that girl here, Silas? She asked, her voice too light to be friendly. People talk. I didn't answer. Clara looked at me for a long moment before nodding to herself and leaving. When I turned back, Sahel was still sweeping, her face unreadable. That night, I thought I heard her humming low in her room, a tune that bent around the edges like smoke. Winter deepened. The cold pressed in so hard it seemed the air itself might break. Wolves came down from the hills, their howls threading through the dark. Supplies thinned. One afternoon, a figure rode up from town, a ranch hand I'd seen in the saloon, already drunk before noon. He swung down from his horse with the swagger of someone who thought the world owed him. She's not rightly yours to keep, he slurred, pointing at Sahel where she stood by the barn. I've got coin says she'd do better at my place. His breath steamed in the air, sharp with whiskey. I stepped between them, my hand resting easy on the rifle slung over my shoulder. He laughed, but there was no mirth in it. Before I could speak, Sahel stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. She said nothing, but her stare held until his own faltered. He spat into the snow, muttered, and mounted up. The hoofbeats faded into the hills. That night, as I banked the fire, I found myself wondering what storm she had already survived, and why she hadn't broken. A week later the blizzard came. It swallowed the world in white, snow piling against the doors, wind moaning in the eaves. Sometime in the night, I woke to find her gone. Panic cracked through the cold in my chest. I pulled on boots and coat, the snow already waist-deep when I stepped outside. Through the blur, I saw her, bent over in the drift beyond the barn, digging with her bare arms. A calf, half frozen, lay beside her, its breath thin as thread. Together we heaved it into the barn, our clothes soaked through, our skin burning with cold. Inside, by the fire, I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Her hands trembled as I took them in mine, rubbing warmth into her fingers. She stared at the flames for a long time before speaking. Her voice was low, almost lost under the crackle of the wood. She told me of her family, a winter that took them one by one, the sickness, the hunger. Her words came without tears, each one laid down like a stone in a path. I told her of my brother, lost in a cattle stampede, the sound of hooves chasing me still in my dreams. We spoke of the dead until the snow eased, and in that strange stillness, something unseen took root between us. But peace in winter never lingers long. It was late in the season when the drunken ranch hand returned, this time with 2 others. They came when I was out mending a fence line, their horses tied to the gate, their boots tracking mud across the porch. Sahel was alone inside. The men's voices were low, their laughter mean. They told her she was coming with them. She didn't run. Instead, she reached above the hearth for the rifle, her hands steady as the barrel found its mark. The silence stretched, broken only by the wind under the eaves. Something in her eyes must have told them she would use it. They left without a shot fired. I came back to find her standing in the yard, moonlight turning the snow silver around her. Her face was wet, but not with fear. She turned when she heard me but didn't move toward me. She stood still, as though letting me decide if I belonged in her light. I stepped to her slowly and she didn't step back. Spring came early that year. The hills shed their snow in streams that fed the valley, the air rich with the scent of wet earth. One morning, Sahel knelt by the porch, pressing seeds into the soil. Wildflowers, she said without looking up. They would come back year after year if the ground was kind. I watched her hands work the earth, the gloves I'd given her now worn soft with use. We never spoke of love outright. It lived in other things, the way she filled my coffee cup before I asked, the way I mended her saddle strap before she noticed it was torn. We built the days quietly, side by side, each one another step in something we both knew but did not name. The silence between us was no longer a wall, but a shared room. And so I tell you this, not as a man who won something, nor as one who saved someone. The world will tell you love is a prize, a battle, a thing you take by force or chance. But sometimes, love is the quiet choice to stay, every day, until the snow turns to green.